Okay, well, let's get started with our motivation for class. So, I mean, these are great examples that we've just been talking about of people bringing that positive energy, trying to, make a change from whatever they can do in whatever way they can make a change in society. So that's the same as what we're trying to do, essentially, isn't it? Is that we're trying to make a change in whatever way we can to ourselves and by extension from ourselves to other people, so that over time, might not be just this lifetime, but over countless lifetimes into the future, that we can have a positive effect on not just ourselves, but all beings who have connections with us as well. So, really trying to bring that as our motivation for our study today. Then we'll set our motivation and recite the refuge and bodhicitta and the four immeasurables. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. Okay, so this is our last week on the Bodhicitta course for discovering Buddhism. So there's always more that we could talk about, there's never really enough time. So this has really just been an introduction, like I've said, I think week after week. And so please don't leave your studies here with just this 6-week introduction, because this is such a powerful practice, developing that really highest expression of altruism in our own mind. So it's such a powerful practice, so that whatever extent we can develop it within our minds and then build on that more and more, then we ourselves will gain benefit from that. Our mind will become more expansive, it will become more open, it will become more receptive to others, it will become more affectionate towards others. So, the benefit we will reap will be enormous to whatever extent we can develop it within our own minds. And then, of course, there will be a benefit to others as we are able to develop our capacity to benefit others more and more. And also just even through our way of living our lives, that will benefit others around us. It's that sort of the rub-off effect, isn't it? The ripple effect out from what you do in your own life definitely has an effect on those that come into contact with you, even just in this life. So taking what we're learning here as the basis, please do what you can to increase your understanding, increase your capacity, increase your practice of this more and more. So it really will be of great benefit. So last week we talked we started talking about the equalizing and exchanging self and others. Did you have a bit of a think over what we discussed last week, over the last week? Any thoughts that came up in your mind, any doubts, any ideas, any questions? Did you find, like, in trying to put into practice some of the things that we discussed, was there anything that any experiences that you had in your mind, Scarlett?
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I always find this practice, like, I guess it's called Lan, right?
That's part of it. Yeah, the Tonglen is part of it.
I just always find it scary. Like,
Mm.
if I think of, I don't know how to kind of how to feel more comfortable, but my mind thinks that I'm gonna get their suffering. Like I don't know where to kind of channel like what they're feeling, like how to imagine it and where in my body that I'm not my mind and brain feels like I'm harming myself.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point because it's a really good point and something I was going to talk about today for sure. Um, so one thing that's important, so I'll probably address your questions over the course of the class, but one thing that's important to take note of in this practice, so it's, as we said, it's equalizing and exchanging self and others. So Tonglen is a part of the practice, but it's not the whole practice. So it's important to not take out a bit of the practice and try and do that in isolation, because this is exactly what you can end up with, right? So you can end up with really having great fear with respect to this one part of the practice because you've isolated it from all the supporting aspects of the practice. So when you look at the whole practice in its entirety, it starts off with the equalizing. So equalizing self and others. So this is the foundation. So like we had equanimity at the foundation of the sevenfold cause and effect instruction. So there we were equalizing our attitude towards these categories of friend, enemy, and stranger, so that we wouldn't have this bias towards our friends, the people who help us, and bias away from or pushing away those that harm us, and just indifferent to everybody else. So we were developing a sense of equal care and concern across the board. So really reducing down our attachment, our anger, and our indifference so that we could have a level playing field when we're dealing with sentient beings, other sentient beings. So that was the foundation in the sevenfold cause and effect instruction. Here, the equalizing is also a type of equanimity, but in this case, what we're doing here is really developing a very solid understanding, a very solid like conviction, just through reflecting on reality, which is that there is absolutely no difference between ourselves and all other sentient beings in terms of our wanting happiness and are not wanting even the slightest of sufferings. So this is the foundation, and it's where you have to start. Before you even get to the Tonglen part, the giving and taking part, that's the foundation. So this is what we talked about last week. And so it's important to not sort of jump ahead and go to giving and taking without getting a really good, solid foundation in this equalizing part. Because we know, it's like His Holiness has said it so many times, we're all the same. We're like 8 billion people on the planet, or is it 9 billion? I've lost track now. Used to be 7, maybe it's 8 now. There's a lot. Anyway, this is just people, not even taking into account all the animals, which would outnumber us, like massively, and not taking into account even, all the beings that we can't see with our eyes. So just thinking about the people, the humans on this planet, we'll say 8 billion, give or take. So each and every single one of us is completely the same in respect of us always wanting happiness. We go from one happiness to the next happiness to the next happiness. This is our constant like search in life. It's like even from tiny little things like, for instance, you've got an itch on your nose and your immediate reaction is to like scratch it, isn't it? You want to get rid of that tiniest little itch of suffering. I mean, this is tiny. You could technically sort of wait there and just see what happens to the itch. And there is actually, a practice, a meditation practice that involves watching the sensations in the body, not trying to shift to change, what happens, so change from suffering to comfort and all of this. There is actually a meditation practice that is involved in that. But our natural reaction is like, oh, it's an itch, I've got to scratch it, or it's like, oh, I'm a little bit thirsty. Where's water? Or, where's a drink for me to drink? It's just like it is automatic, and it is like the same for all of us across the board. We're so kind of encased within our sort of self-focus that we don't put the focus out there and look to see how it is for everybody else. So this is like the first part of the process, is that we're starting to move the focus away to just ourselves and our own happiness, and then not, and maybe we include other people in our bubble who are particularly close to us, but even then, still our own happiness is really at the forefront, right? So we're starting to shift our focus outwards to look at what is reality. And reality actually is the case that we are all completely the same. So it's starting to bring down this sense of being self-important, that my happiness is important than somebody else's happiness, that, removing my suffering is more important than removing somebody else's suffering. To really sort of level, again, it's leveling the playing field in another way, seeing how we are all equal in that respect. So that's the first part of the process, but it's only the first part. The second part of the process is that we have to develop an absolute conviction that self-cherishing, that sense of self-importance, that my happiness is more important than your happiness, that my suffering is more worthy of being removed than your suffering, that self-cherishing, that like real self-centeredness is the foundation of all our problems, all of our suffering. That's where it comes from. So really we need to analyze how it is the case, because what it feels like, what our self-cherishing tells us is that actually I protect you, right? You need me, I protect you. I'm the one who's going to look after your happiness. This is what your self-cherishing tells you. So you have to keep hold of me. I'll bring you more happiness. I'll bring you less suffering. I'll get rid of that suffering for you. And so because it's telling us that and we just listen, then we hold on to it. And when we hold on to it, it means that it's able to flourish more and more, and it's able to continue to give us all the problems that we experience in life. So what we need to do then in this next step is to really thoroughly understand how it is that that self-cherishing creates all of our problems. It's the one that combines with the self-grasping that then leads to attachment, that leads to anger, that leads to pride, that leads to jealousy, that leads to all the other afflictions. And it's through those afflictions we do things like we speak badly to others. We, might even lash out physically at others. Even if we don't lash out physically or verbally, we have harmful intent towards others. We behave in all sorts of ways that are negative towards others. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're quite small ways we act negatively, but all of those negative actions, whether they're big, small, whether they're physical, whether they're verbal, whether they're just mental, they all leave imprints on our mental continuum. And those mental imprints, those imprints that are in the mental continuum, will eventually give rise to a result. Like this is just the basic fundamentals of cause and result, whether you look at it in terms of physical cause and result, or you look at it in terms of internal cause and result, karmic cause and result. If you have a cause, once it meets the right conditions, it will ripen into its result. And if it's a negative cause, then it will arise into a result of similar type, which is a negative result, which will be suffering. So the root of all of this process that has led to our suffering now and that will lead to our suffering in the future is at the very root, it's self-cherishing combined with our self-grasping. That's the one that underpins all our afflictions, all our negative behavior. You can see in the world, even how when you look on a macro scale about all the wars, for instance, that are being fought, and all like the internal problems within countries, all the internal problems within families, all come down to this self-cherishing of individuals wanting to protect their happiness, thinking that I am most important. My view is the most important. My people are the most important. You are less important than us. This is self-cherishing. It's very clear, isn't it? When we look at all these problems in the world today, this is what it comes down to. And, we've talked for a few weeks about in the States with what's happening with ICE, for instance, and the violence that has occurred. And it's easy to look outside ourselves and say, oh, that person is doing the wrong thing. That person has done something very bad. That person is a bad person. But when you look to see what is it that caused that action that you feel so vehemently about, at the root, it's actually the afflictions in their continuum. And beyond that, at the root of those, it is their self-cherishing and it is their self-grasping. And we have that in our continuum as well. So it's, if we can really identify how we have exactly that same thing in our continuum that is at the root of all this bad behavior that we identify in others, and we say, oh no, that's somebody else, that's not me. Yeah, we didn't do that particular bad behavior, but we have the cause for it in our continuum. And if it meets the right conditions, who knows what we will end up doing? Maybe not in this life, but what about in future lives? So we really want to develop that sense of finding the self-cherishing to be so unappealing so that it starts to overcome that idea that self-cherishing tells us, that lie that self-cherishing tells us, which is that I am here as your protector. I'm here to help you. I'm here to guard your happiness, because it is a lie. It doesn't do it. It actually creates more problems. So that's the next step, is to really see how disadvantageous self-cherishing is, how many faults and shortcomings it has, so that we develop that wish to evict it from our minds. Like, I don't want to have any part of this self-cherishing. I really want to get rid of it. And on the flip side, seeing all the benefits that come from cherishing others, where we start to really find others to be something that's precious, something to be cherished, something to be nourished. There are others that are being worthy of having happiness, of being relieved from their suffering. So starting to develop that really strong affection towards others and see the benefits that it has for us in the immediate sense, because our mind becomes more open. It becomes more giving. It becomes, instead of tight, it becomes like flexible. And on that basis, that mind that has like really beneficial intent at its foundation, we create the causes for an awful lot of happiness for ourselves. Because, like, as opposed to the self-cherishing process where you have self-cherishing and self-grasping at its root, that leads to negative afflictions and negative actions that lead to suffering. On the other hand, with cherishing others, which is founded on wisdom as the root, then your attitude will be one of like beneficial intent. Your actions will be of benefiting others. The results of those actions will likewise be positive. So the mind not only becomes open right now, but also you create the causes for your own happiness in the future as well. So this is really the second step. So you see how they kind of like follow one after the other. So we haven't actually gotten up to the exchanging self and others or the Tonglen practice at all at this point. There's like a lot of stuff that happens at the foundation to start with that is important. You don't want to just sort of like, set it off to one side and go straight into Tonglen practice. Because unless you really have developed that strong sense of like, I've got to get rid of this cause of all problems from my mind, that self-cherishing, and I really want to develop that mind, like we see in beings like His Holiness and other amazing masters who have, it's like they just radiate warmth from them. They have this attitude that is just like, you feel like they're your old friend, really, because that's their attitude towards you. So we want to develop, have that real wish to develop that warmth of mind within ourselves, that openness of mind. And having developed that, then we go on to the practice of the actual exchanging self and other. Does it make sense so far?
Oh, yes. I guess what I was also, as you're talking, is this what I have to do, like every time I want to practice the giving and taking. So like I do this process.
Yeah, it's like a whole process that you sort of go through. You might not spend like let's say the same amount of time on each part of the process. So I guess it depends how much time you have to do you're allowing for your particular meditation on giving and taking. But yeah, it's good to include all of the steps. Just like with the sevenfold cause and effect instruction, you don't really want to miss out any of those steps because if you do, they're all there for a particular purpose. So if you miss out equanimity, you'll find later on down the track your loving kindness and compassion is biased. If you miss out the recognizing mothers wishing to repay their, recollecting their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, you won't develop that real affectionate attitude that loving kindness depends on. So all the points are important. And you might sort of do shorter meditations on some of them and longer meditations on others, depending on the amount of time that you have.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you feel so far about the things that we've discussed, everybody? Thumbs up. Okay. So then when we move on to therefore the actual exchanging part for others. So it sounds a little bit scary. And like you said at the start, Scarlett, it's like, you can have almost like a little bit of fear when it comes to this part of exchanging self for others or giving and taking, because it feels like, does that mean that I actually have to take on somebody else's suffering? Do I have to actually give away my own happiness? Is that actually what's happening? Is it then, therefore, my own happiness completely disappears? When we have those doubts are actually the talk of self-cherishing because it's holding on for dear life. It's really holding on, It doesn't want you to give it up because it's quite happy in your mind. So this is why those previous two steps, the understanding the shortcomings of self-cherishing and the great advantages of cherishing others is so important because that is what's going to help you to stay motivated through the practice and not get too scared about it. So when it comes to the exchanging self for others, what it means, what it doesn't mean, I should say, to start with, is it doesn't mean that you actually exchange, like you give over yourself and you become somebody else. It definitely doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you actually can give your happiness and your causes of happiness. It also doesn't mean that you can take somebody else's suffering or their causes of suffering. What the exchanging actually means is you're exchanging your attitude of cherishing yourself for an attitude of cherishing others. So in terms of the cherishing part, it's completely the same. Holding dear, holding as important. So that cherishing aspect is what we have had from beginningless time until now for ourselves. And what we're doing through, training our mind is to put that attitude onto others. And so there are techniques for doing that. So one of the really beautiful techniques you can find in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, which is in chapter 8. Have you studied chapter 8, the Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life before? A little bit, Christine? No? Yes? A little bit no, a little bit yes? A little bit? Yep, okay. So in there, that chapter is actually on concentration, in fact, so the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life really teaches all the various practices of a bodhisattva that they do on the path. And so chapter 8 is dealing with concentration or absorption. But in there, he goes into this whole beautiful description of how to exchange this attitude of cherishing oneself and change it to an attitude of cherishing others. And there's kind of like a lot of mental gymnastics that go on in there. So if you have a chance to read the book, I highly recommend it. But it's kind of quite confusing in some respects when you first read it. Because what he's saying is that we should essentially put ourselves in another person's shoes. So not just from the perspective of, oh yes, I understand what you're going through. I can understand that you're experiencing this particular suffering. But he's saying actually, you pretty much identify with other people, and you see yourself, in fact, as other. It's quite confusing. I didn't explain that very well. So currently, we identify self with here, this, right? We are self, we are me, we are I, and everybody else is them. So Shanti Davis says is that really this is like a construction, this idea that this here is self and out there is other, is them. That's like really a dependent construction that we've created through our way of thinking. Because when you think about it, in actual fact, these are not hard and fast categories, because from the perspective of other people, they are all self, they are all me, and we are other. Right. So for instance, you're all looking at me at the moment, and if you think, oh, I'm other to you, but to me, I am self, I am me, I'm I, right? And I look at you, and from my perspective, you are all other than me. You're out there, yes. But from your perspective, you're all self, me, right? It's a little bit confusing, right? But this is the principle. So what he's saying is that actually these are dependent constructions, this idea of self or other, and it depends on your perspective. Just like if you were like you had two mountains, right? It's like I love the Tibetan analogies. They always go with like mountain analogies or field analogies. Anyway, so you got the mountain analogy. So if you're standing on this mountain here, then that would be a close mountain for you, wouldn't it? And you look over at the other mountain, and that would be far mountain. It would be distant mountain. And it appears to you as though those are like finite, definite, like designations. So they don't even appear as though like designations. That seems like a definite certain thing, that the one you're on is the close mountain and the one over there is the far mountain. But then you go over to the far mountain, and is it still the far mountain? No, it's become the close mountain, and the one you were standing on before, that's become the far mountain. Once again, it appears like it's a definite thing. It's like independently close mountain now. So this is kind of like what self and other is in actual fact. We've designated these names in terms of our own perspective, because we live in a very self-centered world, right? So everything is from our own perspective. So Shantideva is saying, really, we need to break down these notions. And instead, we need to try and identify with other as being self. So that sense of dearness, preciousness, selfness that you currently have towards this here, I'm talking about each and every one of us, we should move that onto others, so that when we look back at our old self, our attitude towards our old self is more one like we had previously towards others, as being like less important. Really, it's like, oh, that guy over there, right? That old guy over there, right? That I, yeah, have some familiarity with that person, but they're not as important now because I'm identifying with these people over here. Does it make sense, or is it just really confusing? So he's saying, like, by exchanging our attitude in this way, really putting ourselves in the shoes of others and truly trying to identify with others as we currently do ourselves, then we start to value and cherish the happiness of others as if it were our own. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. So that because you've moved your sense of real identity over towards others, that sense of cherishing over towards others, then when others are happy, you are happy as if it were your own happiness. when others are suffering, then you want to do something to alleviate that suffering as if it were your own suffering. And you are far less concerned with what's happening to your old self because that's not what is most important to you anymore. So if we take that to like, a greater extent, if you think you might be able to think about it in terms of like, just one or two people, so yourself and then thinking about one or two others. But if we extrapolate that out towards limitless sentient beings, if you have that sense of identifying with limitless sentient beings, in that their happiness is as if it's your happiness, their suffering is as if it's your suffering, and you have therefore that desire for them to have more happiness and for them to have less suffering as if it were your own, then you can imagine that how much more expansive your mind becomes, and also how happy do you become if these limitless sentient beings become happy. If you yourself, just one person, becomes happy, it's quite a limited kind of happiness. But when you think on the basis of limitless sentient beings, for them all to be happy, and you're identifying with their happiness as being as though it were your own, how much happier would your mind be? How much lighter would your mind be? So this is Shantideva's method, and it's like just verses and verses of discussing this in a very poetic way, re-identifying, changing our attitude over from this very tight self-focus on one, as opposed to this focus, like as though it's you identifying with all these limitless sentient beings. It's really beautiful. Yeah. So this is like a method for exchanging self for other, exchanging this attitude of cherishing ourselves to an attitude of cherishing others. But I think that probably here, I'm not sure if it's a good thing to talk about or not, if it's a doubt that's arisen in your mind or not. But it's certainly a doubt that I've noticed that has come up in other people's minds when I've been discussing this topic of altruism, is how do you engage in this practice without getting burnt out? Is this something that, occurs to your mind? If you're thinking about how much sentient beings, limitless sentient beings, are suffering, and really trying to develop that compassion that wants to alleviate their suffering. Maybe it doesn't occur to your mind. Does it make you think, oh, when I get burnt out by thinking about all the various sufferings that beings experience? No? Scarlett, you do think like that, or not so much?
No, I do. And I think that's another like sort of thing I wanted to ask and just get you to clarify. Like, when you say help sentient beings, what are you meaning by that? Like, yeah, like, is it caring for them? What is it? Or is it just a wish or a thought? I kind of don't understand that. And I hear that quite often.
Yeah, well, there's different types of help that we can provide for sentient beings. There's different types of benefit that we can provide for sentient beings. So the greatest type of help or benefit that we can provide other sentient beings is to lead them to a state where they have no suffering whatsoever and they have unchanging happiness. So we call that liberation. Even better, actually, we can say to bring them to a state of enlightenment. That's the ideal, right? So that's our kind of final goal, we can say long-term goal. But that doesn't mean that therefore we ignore all the short-term happinesses that we could bring sentient beings, or the short-term, the sort of smaller sufferings that we can, immediate sufferings that we can help sentient beings to alleviate. So I guess there's like a sort of a wide array of benefit that we can bring sentient beings, and whether it is short term in terms of like short term happinesses, not long-lasting happinesses, or whether they're long-lasting happinesses like you find in a state of liberation where you've completely eliminated afflictions together with their seeds. All of that is something that should be within our scope of wishing, when we wish for sentient beings to have benefit. So whatever we can do in the immediate sense, in our day-to-day lives, then that's one of the things. But it's important to remember that we're quite limited with the benefit that we can provide sentient beings now. So what we need to do is try to increase the benefit that we can provide sentient beings through developing our own mind, developing greater capacity of our own mind.
I see. So when we are doing the exchanging, I guess maybe you'll talk about it, or I don't know if I missed it, but exactly what am I supposed to be bringing in to me and taking out? Like, am I supposed to think of a person and think of what they're going through and then do that exchange? Or, yeah.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the Tonglen, the giving and taking mounted on the breath, which is, I think, the classic one that you're talking about there, then yes, we do need to have an understanding of, it can be specific sufferings that we identify that beings are experiencing right now, but also there are general sufferings that everybody, every being within cyclic existence experiences, so we've got the different types of suffering, whether they be the various sufferings of body and mind, which are like, quite a lot. Whether they are the types of suffering that we don't usually identify as suffering. So that suffering of lacking independence, for instance, or of not having unchanging happiness. So we can say those are also types of suffering that we'd like sentient beings to be free of. That process of being reborn again and again within cyclic existence without any control, and having no control over whether we experience happiness or suffering on any given day in any given moment. You can do many things that you hope will bring you happiness, but actually end up bringing you suffering. I was doing my bone density exercise class last night, which, I do because I have the hope that it will increase my bone density, or if not increase it, slow the decline of bone density. So I'm doing it with the hope that it will reduce my suffering down the track. Last night I did my class and I strained my back. I still have very bad back pain. So you have the hope that something's going to bring you happiness or reduce your suffering, but we don't have control over the experience, over what karma is going to ripen in any particular moment. This is the nature of cyclic existence, right? I mean, also, I probably had poor form doing my back squat, but this is still, if I didn't have the cause for experiencing that suffering in my continuum, then it wouldn't have mattered what my form was like in the back squat. It would not have ripened as suffering. But this is the thing, is that I'm in cyclic existence, so these causes for suffering will continue to ripen when they meet the conditions. And this is a big fault of cyclic existence, right? So this is something that we all have to experience within cyclic existence. So there are those sufferings that we can identify within people we know, people we see in the news, animals that we see, that are very specific types of suffering. But there are also these general ones which we want to bring to mind when we do the practice of Tonglen, the giving and taking. But that's for the Tonglen practice specifically. So in terms of Shantideva's method for exchanging self for other, so this is kind of like before you get to the point of doing the giving and taking on the breath, he's talking about exchanging our sense of identity almost for where it is sits at the moment, which is here with each of our, set of aggregates, and exchanging it and trying to re-identify instead with limitless sentient beings, so that, when we wish for happiness, we're wishing it for them. When we're wishing for the relief from suffering, we're wishing it for them. So we're identifying with their experience and not really with the experience of this particular set of aggregates. So placing less importance on this and more importance on what's happening for others, on the basis, I really have to emphasize it, of understanding why it's so beneficial to have that mind that looks outward, and why it's so detrimental to have the mind that is self-focused. So, yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, sorry, Scarlett.
No, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cynthia?
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teachings, as always. I have a question. So, in terms of when we say wishing others to be happy, so because we have different definitions of, right? My definition of happy may be different, and of course, I'm more my mind is informed by my practice in Buddhism. But where I'm struggling sometimes is someone has views entirely opposite of mine, and we could use the extreme, the obvious scenario where someone who seems to be happy just inflicting pain on other people, which is very, very difficult for me. When I see these things on, what that's happening. And in fact, in my practice in the past years before I retired, I even tried to join organizations that would help me understand that opposite view. Like I went out of my way to go to an organization, nonprofit, but to that kind of espouses a different view from mine, just so I could try and understand what their mindset is, and in some ways that helps because I was able to relate that they're people just like me, right? They have families, they have loved ones and all that. I understand, but there's a point where I'm like, how do I, when we say how, when we're just wishing others to be happy, when I know that their definition of happiness, I feel from my perspective will make others suffer. How do I put that into practice? Because it's a big obstacle for me to say, okay, I want to wish them happiness when their version of happiness is not, it seems like it's going to harm other people. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So from what you've said, what I'm understanding is like you're you have a problem with wishing them to have the happiness that they want to have. Is that the
Their
question?
version of happiness. So when we say, just kind of clarifying, when we say we just wish others to be happy because we're trying to put ourselves in their position, which means leaving our own point of view and trying to understand their point of view. But if trying to understand their point of view is saying, well, this person's version of happiness is inflicting harm, how do I then really in practical terms, I really kind of want to know in my meditation, how do I translate that into something meaningful?
Yeah, I understand. Okay. So I suppose we could, like, if we used an example, for instance, of like people who like killing animals, for instance, it might be for sport or it might be for whatever reason, but there are people who quite like killing animals and they enjoy the process, right? They enjoy the process of hunting or whatever it might be. And for them, that's a type of happiness. But when we're looking at it from our perspective, from our studies, from our understanding that we've gained through our, understanding of Buddhism, then we would say that that's actually it's a mistaken understanding of what happiness is. So it's a mistaken understanding of what happiness is because what they're doing is actually a cause for suffering for themselves, and it's also a cause for suffering for others as well, or it's a condition for others to experience suffering. So there's a harmful mind involved in that. And so as a result, they're necessarily placing the causes for their own suffering in their mind. So in a temporary manner, you can say that person from their perspective is experiencing some kind of temporary happiness from the activity of killing animals. But that is not something that you can really wish for a person to have, because together with that, in that action, then they're placing the causes for a lot of future suffering for themselves, and they've created the conditions for suffering for others. So it's a reason to have compassion, and that would not be like this is not like the kind of happiness that we're really wishing for others to have. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, I think I can understand. So it's trying to extend compassion. So within what we've learned in terms of karma, and that ultimately it will cause some suffering, that would be a source of me extending compassion because of that. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So we really have to, I suppose, as you say, we need to understand or identify exactly what proper happiness is, for starters. So the real happiness is the one that you get once you've eliminated afflictions. That's real proper happiness. It's not like an excitement that comes from, some kind of like worldly thing, like getting a new car or getting a new house or winning the lotto. It's not like that. It's a happiness that is completely stable, that will not fluctuate at all due to afflictions. That you have control over as well. That's really proper actual happiness. But that's not to say that there aren't temporary happinesses, like, for instance, having good health, having food and drink, having a place to live. These are all like sort of worldly happinesses, but they're not proper happinesses. And in fact, they are actually in the nature of suffering. We say these are sufferings of change in actual fact. So that's not to say that we don't need those sufferings of change, those temporary happinesses that are not long lasting, that come and go, that we don't have control over. We do need those things, but it's just that they're not the proper ones. They're not the actual happinesses. So it is important to identify what actual happiness is, what proper happiness is, and be able to identify that these other happinesses that we have that are worldly happinesses are really in the nature of suffering. So they're not the end goal, in other words, but they're still useful for us, for as long as we don't have the actual or proper happiness.
Thank you, Venerable. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so we've discussed about, Shantadeva's attitude of exchanging our attitude of cherishing ourselves for cherishing of others. So now let's have a look at the Tonglen practice specifically. So this is where we take that attitude of exchanging our self-cherishing attitude for an attitude of cherishing others. And we do the practice of loving kindness and compassion, but mounting it on the breath. So we do it together with the in-breath and the out-breath. So I'm sure many of you will have done this before, or at least have heard of it. So the way that it works, and this is kind of interesting because you might have come across other meditations where you might do some breathing practice, right? You use the breath because the breath is like something we always have. It's constantly going through our life. And so it's something that we can use. It's a physical process that we can utilize for various things. So sometimes you might use a meditation on the breath just to calm the mind. So we often do that at the start of meditations, just to sort of settle the mind. But you might also have come across a practice where you breathe in white light with all the Buddha's and Bodhisattva's blessings, and that enters your body, completely fills your body. And as you breathe out all this like black smoke and soot and stuff, which is all your afflictions, all your suffering, all the seeds of the afflictions, all leaving your body, completely exiting, going far, far away and disappearing. Have you come across this meditation before? So it's often connected with the 9-round breathing, which is, you breathe in through one nostril, out through the other, like this, and then through both nostrils. Okay, so you've come across that one before. So that one feels like it's a really nice way to settle the mind as well, and to make the mind quite lucid in preparation for the next meditation that you're going to do. In Tonglen practice, then actually we reverse the process because the purpose is different. So with these other breathing meditation practices where you're breathing in the white light, it's filling your body feels really clean and pure and sending out all that negative stuff. So it all disappears. So with that, it's about settling the mind, making the mind clear. With the Tonglen practice, it's about removing your self-cherishing. So that's the purpose. So this is why we change up the process. So for this practice, then what we do instead is as we breathe in, we're breathing in, like you can say, the sufferings and all the challenges of all sentient beings, breathe them in the form of like black smoke or soot. Sometimes it's like black hairs. And they enter in through your nostrils and they descend down into your heart where you have visualized your own self-cherishing in like, it's like could be a hard ball at your heart. Maybe it's like made of iron or steel or something that's quite, really solid and unpleasant thing at your heart. And you think all of that is descending down into that self-cherishing rock at your heart, and it's completely destroyed. And as you breathe out, you're breathing out all your good qualities, all your happinesses, or all these good things that you possess. You're breathing them out in the form of white light and sending it out to all beings in the 10 directions, and think that they are established in happiness, a good type of happiness, proper happiness, unchanging happiness. So it's a different process. But what it's doing is it's increasing our compassion as we breathe in all the suffering, all the negative stuff of other sentient beings that they have to experience. And it's going into that self-cherishing and completely smashing it. So that's compassion. And then as we breathe out all our good qualities, all our happiness, and it all enters all sentient beings so they're established in that proper actual happiness of liberation. That's loving kindness. So that's the process of Tonglen, or giving and taking. So it's not the case that you can actually take on another person's suffering. If you think of the fundamental principles of karmic cause and effect, you cannot experience the result of an action that you did not do, right? This is one of the 4 principles of, the general characteristics of karma. So if you didn't create the cause, there's no way you can experience the result. So you can't actually experience the sufferings of other sentient beings. Because you haven't created those causes, you can only experience the ones that you yourself have created. And likewise, when you give away your good qualities, you give away your happiness, it's not as though you actually are able to give away those things to other sentient beings, because they're results of things that you yourself, causes that you yourself have created. But what it's doing is it's priming your mind through thinking in this way, through adopting this attitude, and through developing that attitude where you are thinking that you are doing it in actuality. It primes your mind so that when you have that opportunity to benefit another person in some way or another, to bring them happiness or to alleviate their suffering, then your mind is so ready to go. And also, it motivates you to be able to develop your capacity where you can do this to what can we say, in an effortless and spontaneous way. So it motivates you towards attaining the state of a Buddha. So this is the point of the practice. Does it make sense? So, okay, thumbs up from Scarlett. So does that sort of address the issue that you feel sometimes when, you're thinking about doing this Tonglen practice?
Absolutely. I think what you just said about how, because I didn't create the causes for what I'm breathing in, then it can't affect me. I think that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, you can't actually experience that particular suffering, but we are developing the mind where it's like, if we had the ability to do it, we totally would. So it is important to not just leave it at a level of like, oh, well, I can't really do it anyway, so it's not really a big deal. We do really want to try and develop that attitude of like, I'm really taking on the sufferings of these beings. I really am giving over my happiness. So it's important to have that kind of attitude. But the reality is that, of course, you can't actually experience the result of something that you did not do. So perhaps what we'll do is we'll do a short meditation on this Tonglen practice. So this meditation is taken from a commentary to the Lama Chepa, the Guru Puja practice. So I don't know if you do that practice regularly, but towards the end of the Guru Puja practice, there is the Lam Rim prayer, which goes, there's like goes through all the stages of the path, all the Lam Rim stages, right through there. And there's one verse on equalizing and exchanging self for other. And there's this beautiful commentary on the practice, and it gives a meditation on how to do this Tonglen practice. So we'll do that one. And what's a really nice addition to the practice here is that he says that if you had like sort of lack familiarity with this practice, then what you can do to start with in the Tonglen practice is actually, instead of starting with taking and giving with respect to other sentient beings, you can start by taking on the sufferings that you yourself will experience at a future point. So you get your mind familiar with the process by, for instance, thinking about the sufferings that you might experience this afternoon, the sufferings that you might experience tomorrow, next week, down the track in this lifetime towards old age. There's all the sufferings that come from old age, sickness, death. So taking on all those sufferings that you yourself will experience in this lifetime, for starters, and giving over to yourself happiness. And then, having gained some familiarity with it like that, you then start to extend out towards other sentient beings. So I'm not making it up. It's actually in the commentary, just in case you were wondering. So I don't know, we're supposed to start with ourselves, but it says here, so it's okay. All right. So, okay, just settling into a comfortable posture. So you're alert, but also not too tight. Your body's kind of relaxed, but still not falling asleep. Just allowing the mind gradually to settle into the body. And coming to rest on that inhalation and exhalation of the breath. And then around you, visualize yourself surrounded by all mother sentient beings. Limitless, as vast as space. And developing the thought, these old mothers of mine are tormented by suffering. Each one is worthy of my compassion. And your heart, visualize your self-cherishing thought that holds yourself as most important. dear and supreme, in the form of a hard rock. First, thinking of all the sufferings we ourselves will experience later today, through this month and this year. Sufferings of body, sufferings of mind, sadness or grief, illness, sufferings as we approach death. All of these sufferings that will occur due to the negative actions that we ourselves have created. Wishing ourselves to be free from all of these sufferings that we'll experience throughout the rest of our lives. Visualizing them entering through our nostrils in the form of black shavings or soot. Descending down that self-cherishing rock at the heart. As we breathing in these shavings, dark black soot. Entering into that self-cherishing rock, destroying it. Focusing on that inhalation to start with. Each time you breathe in all those sufferings, smash the self-cherishing. You visualize your future self as completely free from all of those sufferings. And then as you breathe out, breathing out white light to yourself, future, all the way to the end of this life. Breathing out happiness, and virtuous qualities. Your future self becomes completely radiant, calm and happy. Filled with positive qualities, loving kindness, patience, generosity, wisdom. Now visualize before you your mother of this lifetime, or the person who has been like a mother to you in this life. Consider all the sufferings that she undergoes right now, will continue to undergo in this lifetime. She has no control where she'll be reborn in the future. She'll have to continue to experience the results of her negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. As you inhale, imagine all of her negative karma, her suffering emerges from her right nostril, form of black soot, shavings. And draw them in with your breath, entering through your left nostril, and descending down to the heart, to that rock of self-cherishing. As you breathe in each time, imagine all those negativities, a form of black soot, completely destroy that rock of self-cherishing at your heart. And you're left with only expansive affection in your mind. Think that your mother has been completely freed from all of her suffering, all of her causes from suffering. As you exhale, think that all your happiness and virtue exit from your right nostril in the aspect of white rays of light. They enter the left nostril of your mother. She becomes endowed with all happiness and the causes of happiness. Body and mind are completely filled And seeing this, your own mind becomes completely joyful. Now gradually extend this meditation out towards other sentient beings that surround you, breathing in all of their sufferings, causes of suffering, in the form of black soot. With each inhalation, draw them in through your nose, down to that self-cherishing rock at your heart, where it's completely destroyed. All their negativities drawn out. Destroy that self-cherishing at your heart. And as you breathe out, breathing out all your happiness, causes for happiness, or your qualities. All your virtues. Feel the bodies of all sentient beings. Develop all realizations on the path. Develop perfect, complete enlightenment. Great delight in your mind. Think how wonderful it would be if I were able to liberate all living beings from samsara. Establish them in a state of enlightenment. Okay, so opening your eyes, having a little bit of a stretch if you need to. So, yep, it's a good stretch. Okay, so that's you'll find different presentations of that Tonglen practice. That's the one that was in that particular commentary. So it's okay to start with, because, we inhale and exhale quite fast. It's okay at the start to practice just focusing on the inhalation to start with. And then after you've done that for a bit, you can then focus on the exhalation rather than trying to go in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. It gets a bit sort of stressful, right? If you're not so familiar with the practice. So that's a fine way to do it, is just like focus on the inhalation. So inhaling all of those negativities, etc., destroying the self-cherishing. And then gradually, after you've gotten familiar with that, then you start extending out, so then giving out that white light, which is all your qualities and happiness, to all sentient beings. And it's really good to develop as much as you can that conviction that they have definitely been free from their suffering, and they have definitely accomplished all this perfect happiness. Yeah. So that way we develop the mind that, becomes stronger and stronger in its potency for loving kindness and compassion. And that naturally will inspire us onto striving to develop the capacity to really be able to bring that about. Because it's possible for each and every sentient being to get to the point where they have eliminated all of their negativities of mind, that they have accomplished all perfect qualities of mind. It's absolutely possible. It's possible for us, and it's possible for all other sentient beings. So if it's possible, then what we want to do then is to develop the ability to enable, help every single sentient being to accomplish that for themselves. That's our goal. And the mind that wants to do that, that's the mind of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So you can see how these two methods both lead towards that mind that is intent on attaining enlightenment. So both of them involve this practice of loving kindness and compassion. It just is the methods are a little bit different, that's all. And there is, in fact, a way to combine these two methods, the sevenfold cause and effect instruction and exchanging self for others, into one 11-fold method. I'll just send you through in the chat because we don't unfortunately have time to discuss the sevenfold method, but I'll send it through so you have it there. Just one second. Okay. Oops, no, I just shared the screen instead of shared it in this chat. That's not what I intended to do at all. Sorry. Okay, there we go. No, there we go now. Okay, yes, it's gone. Should be there. Yeah, okay. So that's something just for you to have a look at over, the next while. While it's fresh in your mind, if you go over it, then it may be helpful in terms of seeing how all these steps fit together in that one process. But it's okay to do the processes separately as well. So it's whichever works for your mind is the best for you. Yeah. Okay, so we're drawing close to the end of class, and I realized that I haven't actually covered all of the information that I really wanted to cover because, of course, there's a lot more discussion to be had about, well, what happens once you've developed bodhicitta? Once you've given rise to this mind of enlightenment, it doesn't end there. That's just the start. That's the motivation. What then has to happen is that we need to then go on and actually do the things that will get us to enlightenment, that state where we have that perfect capacity to benefit other sentient beings. So that's where the bodhisattva conduct comes in. So we are not yet bodhisattvas. It's still, like I was saying, I think last week, I think Nim, you asked the question about, when do we become bodhisattvas? So we only become bodhisattvas when that mind of enlightenment, the bodhicitta, becomes what we say is uncontrived, where it becomes effortless and spontaneous, arises automatically. So we're not there yet. We have to work at it. We're sort of still at the contrived level. But that doesn't mean that therefore we don't try and do the practices like a bodhisattva does. We still try and emulate the conduct of a bodhisattva. So that means engaging in the 6 perfections. So generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom, all of them motivated by bodhicitta. That's what makes these practices perfections or practices of perfections. So these are things that, really we can subsume the majority of the bodhisattva conduct down into these 6. So these are a good place for us to start with our practice, our practice in emulating that of the bodhisattvas. So that's what we call conduct, so the bodhisattva conduct. And together also with that, if we're able to take the bodhisattva vow, which is technically called the engaging vow, that's also excellent. So once we have the engaging vow, the bodhisattva vow, engage in the practice of conduct together with bodhicitta, then we will have what's called an engaging bodhicitta, an engaging mind of enlightenment. That's where you're actually starting to take the steps to get you towards where you're trying to go, which is the state of a Buddha. As opposed to just like going, oh, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, where it's just at the level of aspiration. Once you're actually engaged in the conduct that will get you there, then you've got an engaging mind of enlightenment, an engaging bodhicitta, together with the bodhisattva vows. So that's kind of like the next step on the process, I suppose you could say, in terms of where to from here. So we've studied a lot about bodhicitta here, the mind of enlightenment. So what do you do with that? Now you've got to practice the conduct, learn about the conduct, and then engage in the practice of the conduct. Yeah. So could have gone into heaps more detail about that, but unfortunately, we've kind of run out of time. But do you have any questions? Yeah, Joey. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
When you talk about conduct, would that be the 6 perfections, for instance?
Exactly. Yep. So practicing the 6 perfections, that would be a practice of the conduct. Yeah, bodhisattva conduct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I feel like I've talked a lot. So either it was all extremely clear, which I doubt that I was that clear, or, or else you already understand it all. Well, I hope that,
Processing a lot.
Sheila,
Or we're processing a lot.
was it too much? Did I give you too much information?
No, it's perfect.
Do you feel like you have somewhere to start from?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the one other thing I did want to mention is also in the practice of giving and taking, Tonlen, there's also a way in which you can utilize what happens to you on a daily basis in your practice of Tonlen. And actually, this is a really nice thing to be able to remember. Because while we're in samsara, while we're ordinary beings and we don't have control over our experiences, we will necessarily go through times when we experience suffering. Might be small sufferings, just like, we can say my back pain, for instance, on the scheme of things is relatively small. Or it might be, really like life-threatening illnesses, these kinds of things, or whatever it might be physically. Or we can have on a mental level, we can have sufferings where our mind is disturbed. Maybe it's quite badly disturbed. Other times, sometimes you can wake up and you just feel sad. There's that like lowness of mind. And our natural reaction to all of those sufferings is to push them away, right? It's like, I don't want this. I want to get rid of it. And I'm not saying that, you shouldn't take the medication that you need to take or all of that. Definitely you should do all of that. But on a mental level, how do we deal with these experiences that we have no choice but to experience from time to time? So, like I said, if there's something we can do in terms of a medicinal assistant, we should definitely do that. But what we also need to do is try and find a method to make it so that we can utilize these experiences as ways to increase and improve our mental development on a daily basis. So one of these ways is to use it for our practice of Tonglen, in fact. So anything that you experience like this, any kind of small suffering, any kind of big suffering, what we want to try and do, or what you can give it a go and see how it goes for you, is in place of having this mind that goes, no, I don't want it, push it away. You have to experience it anyway, right? Doesn't matter if you have, just makes it worse in actual fact if you go, I don't want to, push it away, have that real sort of rejection in your mind. And it's still going to stick around anyway. Instead, what we can do is think, well, I'm experiencing this now. How many other beings in this universe are currently experiencing exactly this same suffering as me? It's not going to just be one or two. It will be many, many beings that are experiencing this same suffering or of a similar type to this suffering as you. And what you can do is use that practice of giving and taking, in that you think, well, may this suffering that I experience now act as a substitute for all these other beings who have to experience this, so that they don't have to experience that. It doesn't actually make, it's not like you're taking on their sufferings or anything like that. But what you're doing is you're just utilizing what you already have to experience anyway to increase your practice of compassion. But may it act as a substitute for anybody else who has to experience this suffering. May they not have to experience that because I'm experiencing it for them. And it really is a very sort of nourishing way that we can approach all the different problems that befall us in life, to change that attitude. So it immediately stops your pushing away, I don't want this. Instead, you're going, well, I'm going to utilize this. I have to experience it anyway. I'll utilize it to increase my compassion. Christine?
Yeah, I've done that practice before when I'm sick, and it does help, and it takes your mind off yourself and passion for others. Because I've done that. It really helps your mind not start going that, like you're pushing away or start getting mad because you're sick, or it helps your mind a lot.
Yeah, good, excellent. Yeah. So, and the more familiar we get with doing it, then hopefully it's like as soon as some kind of problem arises for us, we can turn our mind straight to that, rather than it being, straight away to push it away, push it away, push it away. If our mind automatically goes that direction, it will really change our approach or our relationship with our own problems. Ferdy.
It seems, is this like a form of dedicating the merit of taking on that? You're transforming it into merit by having the suffering, maybe?
Well, you're not so much transforming it into merit, is what you're doing is you're utilizing it as a method for increasing your compassion. And through your compassion, you accumulate merit.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. And so then also, of course, whenever we do any kind of like virtuous practice, even whether it's a tiny virtue, whether it's a big virtue, whatever it is, we should always make sure that we dedicate that merit for the right goal. So dedicate it towards enlightenment, dedicate it so that we are able to attain that state where we can actually alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that's just like a sort of a nice addition to our discussion of Tonglen, giving and taking. So I hope that your practice goes well, and however much that you're able to meditate on bodhicitta, and it doesn't have to be like, formally on the meditation cushion, while you're washing the dishes, while you're brushing your teeth, any of those times throughout the day, if you can use it as a moment to reflect on bodhicitta, to reflect on compassion, loving kindness, having that great affection towards all sentient beings, while you're standing in the queue at the supermarket, whatever it is, take those moments and just familiarizing ourselves every day, even if it's just a little bit, with this different attitude. Slowly over time, then our self-cherishing will reduce gradually, gradually, gradually. So I really wish you really well with all your practice, and I will endeavor to keep working on mine as well. And it's great that we have this community where we are all really, supporting one another, even if it's just coming to class and having these discussions. I think it's like we're so very fortunate in the world today that we have other people who are on a like-minded path as ourselves. So I really am very grateful that you're all interested in learning about these things and interested in putting them to practice, and all willing to have discussions and share your experiences as well. So thank you very much for coming along to the classes. So now let's dedicate all the merit that we have accumulated through all of our study during this course, and all of our merits that we've accumulated through this lifetime and beginningless lifetimes, to our attainment, to our development of an uncontrived mind of enlightenment, so that we become bodhisattvas, and to the attainment of the result of that path, enlightenment, so that we can benefit all sentient beings. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you all some point in the future.